The answer to the question of is freelancing eco-friendly is very simple, and I will give you the answer right now. It can be. It has a very good potential. And in this presentation, I will talk about two things. Why it has a very good potential, so why freelancing has a good eco-friendliness potential, and how we can elaborate on this potential. Right. I will start with the why. And to elaborate on the why, we have to understand where we are today with all the ecological problems, with all the problems with the weather and with the environment. And the basis of this is that all the issues environmentally that we have today, they are outcomes. They are outcomes of some kind of decisions. They're outcomes of how we make business, how industries work, how policies work, etc., etc. So the way we live and work has an outcome, and that outcome, unfortunately, has very causes very serious problems for the environment. But these things are connected. So the way we live leads to the outcomes that we have, which are not really good to the environment. Now, to have a different outcome, obviously we have to do things differently. But where we are right now globally with environmentalism is that we already realize that we have to do things differently, but we are still doing the things they were done before. And as you can see, there is no connection there. Now, I think that as a freelancer, you already chose to do things differently. So it gives a good potential for a more eco-friendlier life and conduction of business. So when we speak about that, we want different outcomes. As a freelancer, you already are familiar with how you can make different decisions and how you can make things differently. So this connection can be made. This is why I think that there is a great potential in freelancing, or as a freelancer, you have a great potential to have that kind of open mind and be open to try out new things and make things differently because you already do this. Now, I will focus on what a freelancer can do as an individual. If this would be a consultancy course, let's say, for companies or businesses, or some kind of governing body, I would have to tell you different things. Now I will focus on what you can do as an individual freelancer. This is very important because we have to manage your expectations, right? As an individual, you have a very limited scope of what you can do. And oftentimes we see that people tell us that, well, I can do really much, so I won't do anything. You know, big corporations have to take care of these big problems. What I can do as a person. And it's true that as an individual, it's limited. The scope of your possibilities is limited, but it's very important that within your scope, within that limited scope, you do whatever you can do. You just have to think about that if you choose to do things differently, and let's say thousands and thousands and thousands of people choose to do things differently, that is already a considerable mass of people thinking and doing things differently. So you have to manage your expectations. The other thing is, and this is a word of warning, what you will encounter, and this is a trend for the last couple of years, is that a lot of players in the field of sustainability, a lot of companies especially, will tell you that the responsibility of having a more eco-friendly life lies with you, which is, as I mentioned just before, true to some extent. It's important to realize that this narrative that the responsibility is yours is actively used to outsource the responsibility from bigger players like companies and sometimes governments. But you have to realize that there are some things that you cannot do as a person, so the responsibility for those cannot be outsourced to you individually. Let's say you are a country and you're sharing a river with a neighboring country. And along that river, there are different industries and complexes that are polluting the river. As a person, individually, you can go out and ask your government to do something about that, but you cannot sign a treaty, you cannot sign a document, you cannot change the processes in those industries. So the responsibility is shared. Everybody has that responsibility. Don't let you be fooled by the narrative that all the responsibility is yours. But let's see what kind of responsibilities you can have as an individual and what kind of possibilities are opening up to you if you are a freelancer. Now, I will have 5 assumptions about freelancing, and we will go through these, and I will give you some examples of what these assumptions, very tangible examples, what these assumptions can mean for a more eco-friendly life or for a more eco-friendly business. But you have to realize that some of these assumptions might be applicable to you, some might not be applicable to you, and some might be applicable in the future, let's say. So think about this as a way of, we will talk about how you can think about the possibilities that freelancing opens up to you rather than practical things that you can do, right? Okay, so my 5 assumptions will do with time, will do with income, equipment, location, and business. Now let's go through them one by one. My assumption is that as a freelancer, you have more time on your hands and you can manage that time more freely. My assumption is that as a freelancer, you might have more income. As you can see, I say might. So these might be applicable to you or might not, or you might think about, okay, how I can work in the future towards these things so they are applicable to me. The third one is that you might have bigger freedom in choosing what kind of equipment and devices you're using for your work. The fourth one is that you might have bigger freedom in choosing where you're working and how you're getting to work. And the fifth one is that you might have bigger freedom in choosing who you're doing business with, who are your customers, partners, and what you are due as a freelancer for a living. We'll go through all 5 of these assumptions and see what potential they hold for a more eco-friendly life. And again, it's very important. I will go with individual possibilities, so they will have a limited scope, but it's very important that we take these steps if we can. First is time. My assumption is that as a freelancer, you have way more time, if not way more, but at least more time on your hands, and you can manage that time more freely than someone who is an employee. I was an employee, and my workday was, well, a couple of years ago, my workday was 8 hours plus 2 hours of commute. When I became a freelancer, I was able to work 6 hours, and I didn't have to commute, so those were 4+ hours. Now, this might be applicable to you. This might not be applicable to you. This might be applicable to you in the future. It's just a thing. I just want to show you how you might think about your possibilities. And we will take a very pragmatic approach. We will take the approach of, we'll take the topic of food. So food is kind of quite important, but you also have to know that most of the food that we are consuming today comes from industrial agricultural processes. And these industrial agricultural processes are not environmentally friendly, not at all. Now, over the fact that where the food comes from, there is also the convenience of how we get the food. So if you go to your local supermarket or if you're ordering food, the footprint of the food that you're eating is increasing even more with the preparation of the food and transport of the food to your door and the packaging, etc., etc. So the more convenient eating is, the less eco-friendly it can become. And there is a trend here. You have to realize that, or I want to draw your attention to that convenience is not necessarily a very eco-friendly thing. A lot of our economy and products and services is based on how we can save time and make things convenient So, we can spend time on other things, but it means that this convenience comes at an environmental price. If you want to eat environmentally friendly, then you might have to consider to go to a local farmer's market and to prepare your food yourself. Now you can see where the question of time comes into play. Preparing food takes up a lot of time, not going out to the next, not ordering food, or not just going out to the next most closest supermarket for food, but going to farmer's market where probably or you're finding out which are the people who are selling organically grown food takes up a lot of time. Also, it takes up a lot of time to learn about what kind of possibilities you can have as a freelancer. If you join this call, it means that it also takes time. And it also takes time if you want to make some kind of action. So we can think about activism, we can think about you joining a course where you learn more about how you can have a more eco-friendly life. All of this takes time. So this is the very first thing, that my assumption that as a freelancer, you can have more time to spend on how you can live a more eco-friendly life. And now we get to the question of my second assumption, that you might have more income. Now, if you have more income, you can buy time. And as we saw, to have a more eco-friendly life, you kind of have to spend more time on it. And I was talking only about the food, but again, a lot of questions might be there. You might think about travel, and we'll get there. And you might take a train, which will take, again, more time to get to your location for work, let's say, than a plane. But it is a more eco-friendly solution. So your income, if it's higher, you can buy extra time. So you can work less for all your needs and have extra time that you can spend to have on a more eco-friendly life. And then I guess you already have some experience of all the products and services that are responsibly created or offered are way more expensive. Whatever kind of product you buy that might be bio or responsibly sourced or fair trade, these will be more expensive. And I have to say that the increased price is sometimes nowhere near of what would be the real environmental price if you would pay it. So it's more expensive. Environmentally friendly products are more expensive, but they are still not showing the real price that we should pay for them. There is like a 25% buffer that is, so to speak, lost. So by having more income, you can vote with your wallet for these products and services to survive, especially in today's harsh times. The third thing is, my assumption is that as a freelancer, you have more freedom to decide what kind of equipment you use or buy. Now, in the country where I reside, most businesses are changing their equipment every 3 years. So every 3 years, new laptops, new whatever. Of course, it depends on the industry. It might be even new vehicles, it might be even new machinery, etc., etc. And they can do this because the way taxation works is that the amortization of the products is calculated with circa 3 years. So it makes sense to buy new equipment every 3 years for a business or for a company. At least in my country, of course, legislation might be different in the place where you live. Still, as a freelancer, you might have more liberty and freedom to decide what kind of equipment you use. You can go for used equipment, and if you buy used equipment, then you are not signaling the industry that, okay, there is an increasing demand for new stuff to be manufactured and produced. So if you can buy used equipment, it means that less new stuff will be manufactured to a certain degree, and every new stuff that is manufactured, of course, has its very own environmental impact. So you can save on that. It can be also cheaper for you to buy used equipment, but again, going back to the first point, it might take more time. You might have to wait. You might have to to spend a lot of time finding these items. They might not be available at the convenience of a click, as you can have that convenience when you buy something new. So again, we see that convenience is not really eco-friendly. So think about whether you can use used equipment to do your work, because that can have an decreased environmental effect as well. And then we get to a sensitive topic, the topic of location. And here my assumption is that as a freelancer, you have more liberty to decide where you are doing your work from. Now, again, you might have, because let's say if you're a videographer and you have to go to certain sets and locations to make the shooting, then to a certain degree, your hands are tied. But in general, I will assume that you have more liberty to decide where you're working from. And again, decreased commute, or if you're commuting less, it means simply less emissions for the environment. There is an idea of cities and places where we live, the 15 minutes design concept. And it means that it would be very eco-friendly if we could live in places where everything that is important for us, so drugstores and schools and doctors and etc., can be found within 15 minutes of walk. Most cities, most places, and there's increasing urbanization, are not about this. They're about how we can move a lot of people from one place to the other. As a freelancer, you can decide to live, or you might more opportunities to live an eco-local life. And we're getting to a very touchy point for freelancers, and that would be of being a digital nomad. A lot of people are digital nomads. Problem here is that even besides the emissions that are related to frequent travel, you have to think also about what kind of effects your simple presence can have on a certain environment. Let's say as a digital nomad, you're traveling somewhere else and you will stay there for months and work there for months, but thousands and thousands of digital nomads, if they do so, simply the mass of people and their needs will combine. And on that location, on that ecosystem, in that faraway place, it can have a very negative impact indeed. You have to be quite conscious about this. My fellow freelancer, Gergő Benedek, I coined a phrase for this: when you are a freelancer, but not for traveling, but to stay eco-local. And he mentioned being not a digital nomad, but being a digital druid. This is something to think about. The fifth and the last assumption is, and maybe this is even a more touchy aspect than travel for some freelancers, is how you do your business. So my assumption is that as a freelancer, you have more liberty to decide who you're working for, and what partners you are working with, and what you are due for a living. Now, if you are, let's say, a marketing person and you're doing marketing, you might come across some customers whose businesses are not quite eco-friendly, and you might consider to tell them that, okay, but look, I think that it would be unwise for me to work with a company like that, because I have my ecological standards and they're important for me. This is an aspect, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can do this depending on where you are in your freelancing career, but this is a thing to think about. You also can think about how you can reduce or how you can move into industries or be freelancer in industries that have smaller ecological impact. And but this is a touchy question, because then we go down deep to your core competence and what kind of business model you're using. So whenever we got to a point where it might take a hit on your income, that is always a very touchy topic. But as a freelancer, you have more liberty to choose partners, to choose projects, or maybe even to switch completely what you are doing. Let's say I have a person, and they are consulting web shop owners on on how to start a web shop, and they might choose to consult only people who are willing to sell a certain amount of ecologically friendly created products, etc., etc. So to sum this whole thing up, is freelancing eco-friendly? It can be. It has a good basis. It has the potential to be eco-friendly. At least it has way more potential to live an eco-friendly life and to conduct eco-friendly business than if someone is an employee. So the potential is there, but we also have to realize that a lot of action has to be taken to live up to that potential. But I also think, and just getting back to the very beginning of the presentation, that if someone, then freelancers are really good demographic for an eco-friendly life, because what it takes is we want more eco-friendly outcomes, and it means that we have to do different things, or we have to do things differently. As a freelancer, you already do things differently. So you have great potential for this.